Ethan from Kids First, and I'm in Miami, Florida, the Sunshine State. Today we have the pleasure to interview Mr. Peter G, aka Peter Holland. Hi, Mr. G, how you doing?
How you doing? Very nice to meet you.
Mr. Peter lives in Chicago and is a longtime creator. Among his works are comic strips, comic books, computer games, interviews, and articles for the pop culture website Bleeding Cool. Some of Mr. Peter's comic books are Soundwaves, The Supremacy, and Doctor Who's. Is that how you say it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a blend of who and hooves. So yes.
So, how did you first become a writer?
It's hard to say because it's always been an impulse I've just had. I've always been creative. It's one of those things where I can't say what like my first love is. I mean, I remember as a kid, my parents bought me Snoopy books, and I would take those things with me everywhere. And I always wanted to be a cartoonist, but back in high school, you find out quickly that artists can be very exclusionary. And I constantly heard like, "Oh, your artwork's not good enough." I still hear it to this day, in fact. And what happened was that it wasn't going anywhere, and I just basically let it go for like, I don't know, maybe like 20 years or something. And what happened was the movie Over the Hedge came out from DreamWorks, and they released some of the comic strips from the Over the Hedge comic strip, and it brought back the memories of how much fun I had creating. So I got back to work to try and refine my art and come up with a style that would work. And I started doing the comic strip Stress Puppy. And then from there, there was an anime called Cardcaptor Sakura that I really enjoyed, and that inspired me to start doing sound waves because artists do not operate in a vacuum. A lot of people think that when you're an artist, you create stuff and that's it. It's like everything influences you and everything inspires you. And in the case of Cardcaptor Sakura, I just enjoyed the flow. I enjoyed the feeling of it. I enjoyed the characters. And I wanted to somehow create something like that. I wanted to play in that sandbox. And it's just continued on with other things I've worked on, either ideas that I thought were good or just things that struck me. And I'm going, I think I could do something with this. So it's actually relatively recently that I got back into it. My first actual published work was back in 2009, just 10 years ago. But it's been, well, as you can see, I've just been running since then. So it's been a blast.
So, when did you like first start it? Like or what age or when?
Uh, well, it's hard to say. I mean, I always drew, I always doodled. My teachers were always taking my drawings away when I was in school. And like I said, it was just, I kept working on it. In high school, I was trying to be a political cartoonist, but I couldn't get anywhere because I didn't understand how the whole thing worked, how to get into the newspapers and that. And like I said, it wasn't going anywhere, and I just kind of fell out of it. So I've always done it. It didn't die. It just lay dormant until about 12 years ago when I started actually writing scripts for comic books and writing for a video game magazine.
So, did you have any like mentors or role models to help you?
There's been quite a few. For my writing, there's a writer named Peter David. He does a lot of comic books. He had a huge influence on me. Neil Gaiman is a fantasy writer. He did Coraline. He's another huge influence that I've had. For the cartoons, I've had different ones like Chuck Jones, who gave us the Bugs Bunny we know and love, Tex Avery, the king of cartoons, Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli, Ralph Bakshi is also a huge influence on me. So you go through and you see the things that you can get working for you, and that's what you run with. And you want to pick somebody that actually knows how to get the job done, because there's a lot of people that are just flashes in the pan, and they can't actually inspire you when you hit that roadblock, because when you create, you're always going to have problems. There's always going to be something that isn't going quite right. And what do? And for a lot of people, like, as much as I love Disney, I'm a huge Disney nut. Disney was mostly an administrator. He had other people doing the job for him. Whereas Ralph Bakshi, when he had a problem, he had to actually figure something out. So he was not just an artist, he was actually getting his hands dirty in there. And those are the people that you want, because you want somebody that can teach you that when things go wrong, it's not the end of the road. You just got to figure out how to get around the obstacle is all.
So, what's your favorite like genre? Like, for example, drama or comedy or horror?
Comedy. I always come back to comedy. It's I can do other things, and I can do serious, or I can do science fiction, but comedy is basically the first love. That was what I was doing with the Snoopy comics when I was reading Bloom County, and even with Soundwaves, when the story was supposed to be really serious, like the Christmas special about the kids whose parents were getting divorced. I still had to put jokes in there just because that was how it was. So yeah, comedy is the absolute favorite. I do enjoy the other genres, but comedy is the one I always go back to.
And what's your favorite format? Like comics, books, articles, movies?
There is no. It's not a question of the favorite. It's a question of what works for what you're doing. I did a collection of short stories called Hannah Singer's Celestial Advocate, which was a courtroom drama set in the afterlife. And when I was creating it, one of the things that went through my head was, what am I going to do with this? At the time, I wasn't animating, but my options were to try screenwriting, try to get it on TV, try to get it as a book, or try to do it as a comic. And what I wound up settling on was doing it as a regular book, because I could have the book basically be like her talking to you over dinner, because it's a mythology that only I know, and hence only she knows. And with that setup, she could jump out of the story to bring the reader up to speed and then go back in and keep things going. You couldn't really do that with comics, and also with comics, it is a primarily visual art form. So you have to come up with visuals that match it. And that I thought would just be too distracting, because most of what happens in there is mental. It's her trying to be the smartest person in the room and outthink people, and it just didn't work for something where it works better where the reader can move at their own pace, not when you have a TV camera moving things for you, and not when you have a comic with everything else going on around it. So it's not a question of what's my favorite genre so much as what works, what enables me to communicate these ideas and these visions that I have, what gets the job done. So I don't really have a favorite one way or the other, just as long as it works.
So, what is your favorite book or comic that you've been working on? Like mine was Hermit Crab. What's yours?
It's hard to say, because I'm I've been lucky so far. I've really enjoyed all the stuff that I've created. Because I got such a late start, I don't have anything yet that has me looking and cringing on, oh, what was I thinking when I made that? Because there's a lot of people, they'll create stuff when they just start out, and then 10 years later they're like, oh. So because I started this when I was about 39, I had pretty much matured. My thought process had settled. So I haven't really had that thing that has me going, man, what was I thinking when I did that? I love Herman. Herman is a lot of fun to write, and it's very challenging to try and keep it going and not bore the audience to tears. Probably, though, my favorite was Soundwaves, because I still want to go back and revisit that. Rhapsody and Melody, the girls, they were just wonderful to work on. At the time I created them, I was going through a very difficult time with my job, and it was very stressful. It was mentally draining, and working on those comic books was the best therapy in the world. A half hour with them and the world was bright. And I never got to finish the story. I got maybe halfway through with it. So in the back of my mind, Soundwaves is the one that I most want to go back to. So I would say Soundwaves is probably my favorite, just because of the connection with the girls and how it felt when I brought them to life.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Peter, for sharing your valuable time with us Kids First. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was great being here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So this is Ethan Thurston from Miami, Florida, and don't forget to subscribe to Kids First Facebook, Instagram, website, kidsfirst.org, and listen to our weekly radio show Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Pacific Time. And remember, stay home, stay safe, and wash your hands. This is Ethan Thurston signing off. Goodbye.